Hello, Sharron.
Hello, Adam.
How are you today?
I'm good today, Adam.
How
are you?
Good to have you back. I'm good. Wow, big topic today.
Yeah.
Decision fatigue. Why leaders feel stuck. Tough.
I think we're going to follow on from the last episode where we talked about that bottleneck of a founder. We sort of touched on it in the last episode about the decisions that get made. So really felt like it needed its own episode to really talk through that around. We probably underestimate what that actually means for owners of businesses and the number of decisions that get made every day, every week. So really wanted to shine a light on that today.
Yeah, and I think when you're leaders of businesses, you're always busy. And I go, when you're always busy, you always have to make decisions and they feel harder, and it becomes this kind of weight, right? That I've got so many decisions to make. I've got to do all this stuff. I've still got to do my job. I've got all these things, and it just becomes more and more complicated.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of different decisions to be made in a business, whether they're around people, clients, pricing, structure.
Yep.
I mean, the list goes on. So every week there are probably hundreds of decisions that should be being made in a business.
I suppose, and this sort of comes back to our favourite topic, which is structure, making it all work. But the realities of decision fatigue.
Yeah, and I think sort of as I just mentioned there, there are a lot of different decisions that need to get made in a business, and I think that understanding that to start with is a good reflection piece.
Yep.
Yes, there are a lot that need to get made, then helps you kind of then decide, why am I making them all, or should I be making them all, and really thinking about where that decision where decisions should land and where they should be owned.
Yep, definitely. I suppose what you don't want to do is make rush decisions or not make decisions. And they're your two elements if you're not making decisions, right?
Yeah, I mean, we often talk about, and I mean, I'll say this as candidly as this to clients when they sit on the fence. It's like you don't have the luxury to sit on the fence, right? So you have to make a decision, and sometimes they're not always the right ones. But when we talk about this word and we go, there's a decision paralysis that can get into a business. That's worse. Yeah. So if you stop making them, then you don't even stay still. You actually go backward.
Correct. And then if you're making rushed ones, those decisions come with more challenges because they're not as thought out, which means that it adds to that stress of the decision paralysis, because I don't want to make the wrong decision. And we talk about this a lot. I don't think there is a wrong decision. There's just a decision that you have to work a little bit harder to sort of get things back on track. But is the wrong decision, and here's a question, is the wrong decision better than not making a decision?
I would say yes.
I would say yes too.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that happens is that we revisit a topic over and over and over again. So we often talk about productivity uplift in a business, and one of the things that stops that is the inability to make a decision. Because we'll talk about something and then no one's really prepared to sort of land on, this is how we're going forward. So we've just talked about it, and then maybe a week later we'll come back, and I'm not saying us, but this is what can happen to business, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the same thing again. It's like, did anyone make a decision on that? It's like, no one really wants to own the decision. Okay, so week 3 and you've just spent 3 hours talking about the same topic and no decision has been made. So there is an impact on, again, we talk about momentum in a business because we actually haven't been able to make a decision.
I mean, it happens so often, right? And it's
it's
crazy.
Our business, I'm sure that, I mean, we've had the guys say to us.
Well, yeah, it's a good point actually. For some decisions we make really easily, and then some we like to sort of sit on a little bit, and our guys and girls get a bit mad at us. Yeah. But that's okay.
Yep.
Why leaders get stuck. So I suppose, decision fatigue, and this is a really good thing, decision fatigue really comes from lack of intelligence. It comes from the lack of the structure that sits behind the decision making. And, I remember sort of back a long, long, long time ago in an HR life, this sort of accountability or decision matrix. I mean, they're great things to do, but no one wants to do them, right? It's such a, I mean, it is a time commitment, but I go, there's such great things because it makes it black and white who does what. And, given our sort of previous conversation about founders and stuff like that, founders don't want to be put into a box of these are the decisions they can or can't make. But I mean, when we grow up, and I mean that in a business sense, you get boards, you get advisors, you get all these other things that, I mean, it's exactly the same thing. It's just on a larger level where, a founder or a CEO reports to a board. They're allowed to make some decisions, but not all decisions. And you go, it's probably worth it doing an abridged version of it in a smaller business, but it's the same. It's the same throughout the whole business. If you can be specific about what decisions and who makes them and all those kind of bits and pieces, then it frees it. What comes with the structure is the freedom. It says, this is the playbook for a decision. These are all the decisions we make. These are who can make them, and off you go. There's no greyness in that, which is where that paralysis comes in. It's like, well, Sharron's supposed to make that decision. Sharron goes, oh no, Adam's supposed to make that decision. And then
Yeah, and that's why they get stuck. And I'll often say that is because there's no clear priorities.
Yep.
So there's no real understanding about, do I need to make that decision now or later, because I actually don't know whether what I'm making a decision about is the number one priority or whether actually no one cares about it for another year. So that's why that can get stuck. And I mean, this is probably what I would see the most, is that there's no ownership. And I mean, this is the first question I will often ask is, who owns the decision? And
I have heard you ask that a lot of times.
Yeah, and more often than not, they're like, well, he and she, and it's like, well, hang on a sec. Who ultimately someone's got to ultimately own it. And I think that that's where, as businesses are growing and they're scaling and one person made every decision, that's what gets hard. It's like, well, actually, who does own it? So that's why decisions get stuck, is because there's no obvious owner. And then we talked about this in the last episode too, around that whole, that rhythm of whether it be a meeting or a call or something that's consistent and that it has a discipline around. We're not just meeting to talk. We're not just meeting to discuss. We have to have outcomes, and they are as a result of being able to make a decision. So that's why we get stuck too, because there's no structure or rhythm in the business that enables us or forces us to perhaps make the decision.
Yeah, and I suppose, we recently worked with some founders who felt completely stuck, and it's funny because every decision, whether it be large or small, was landing on their desk, and you go, that's a complicated thing. It's, some people sort of put that under the guise of control of outcome, but it's not. You can't scale and you can't grow through that if it's all going to fall on one person. And the other thing is that in those scenarios, there's a if everything falls on one person, then if it's not going in the right direction, everyone also points the blame at one person, and that's not how a good culture and a good business is. It's everyone takes responsibility. Yes, there are some decision makers that make different decisions, but you're all in it together, right? So their good or bad decision ends up being your good or bad decision in the end. So, and I suppose with that one, we sort of mapped out a decision ownership across the leadership team to take the pressure off that leader and put it across the team. And then you get this kind of the cohesion but the structure allowed for the cohesion of that team, which allowed for good decisions to be made.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen clients come to us at a point of exhaustion, and that exhaustion is often around, I just can't make another decision. I'm tired. Yeah. I'm tired of making every decision in the business. And that's sort of where Juno comes in, because we go, well, with the right foundation and the right structure, the right leaders, the right rhythm, the right accountability, ownership, you will start to make less decisions. And I think that whole burnout and exhaustion is real. It's real for a lot of businesses, and we see it every day. So if there is a way that owners can take a step back and go, how do I create or implement a structure that enables me not to be so fatigued by that decision making, then why wouldn't you go and try that?
Yeah. Well, I can answer that question. It's because it's different, because it's change, right? And it's, there's a whole, I said this to someone. I think I said this to you the other day about how I sort of view businesses, where it's like the flat. It's hard to explain a flat pack that you build up in your head, and it's one of those things that this is an element that needs to work with a whole other elements put together. I mean, you cannot have a decision-making matrix without you being very specific about the role and very specific about the outcome. Yeah. And you can't do that unless you've spent time designing the role, to recruit the person, to have them in there, to give them. And it's so funny. And I go, we see a lot of people missing, and I suppose that's another thing here, is we see people missing some steps. So they go, I want a decision-making, I want a decision-making matrix. I want to make that person make that, and that one. You go, okay, well, what's their role? It's like, oh, well, it's kind of they report to 4 people, and they've got, 10 different hats, and where's every hat? And we go, well, hang on a minute, you can't. How does that? How did you recruit this person? Oh, no, they, we made. Oh, here's a good one.
Susie's sister.
We made a role for her because she's so great. I'm like, oh my God, it just stresses me out. But this all works in conjunction with all the things that we talk about in this stuff, and this is just another element. And you don't have to get them all perfectly. You just have to be somewhat intentional. You have to go, and I always say, I don't use the word intentional. I use the word logical. If you need a role, design it. What do you actually really want that person to do? Find a person that matches that, right? Get them on board, make it a great environment, give them an ability to understand what good looks like and what great looks like, and then allow them to make decisions in their area of decision making. I mean, when you say it like that, it seems so simple. It's like, of course that's what you do.
Yeah.
And then you add on all the other things that happen in a business, the stress, the this, the that, all those kind of things. And it becomes super complicated. Where do I have time to design a role? Where do I have time to, spend what we spend is sort of, 40 hours to recruit one person? I don't have time for that. Well, how can you not have time for that? If that's a crucial role for you, why aren't you spending time on that? So all this stuff together, but back to the decision-making, there's the decision ownership. So, as we've talked about, the prioritization, which I bang on about, I would say, every hour of every day when I talk to people. The operating rhythm, which we've sort of talked about, and the escalation rules. This is probably the one that I see is done the worst. They go, I don't feel, I can't solve this, or I don't feel comfortable to solve this. And then nothing happens. And the process of which, who do I escalate it to, and how do I do that is complicated, because, in the business, particularly in a senior leadership team, a person escalating and going, well, I don't actually know how to solve this problem, and well, it's actually your job to solve that problem. Yeah. That becomes hugely complicated.
Yeah.
It's that whole put your hand up if you make a mistake. No one puts it up because no one wants to admit that they're going to make a mistake. But it's we see this time and time again. These little things, they can cause such huge problems in the business if not taken seriously or done correctly.
Yeah, and I think that, no one knows everything. Yep. You could be a subject matter expert and there'll be something that you won't know. And I think it takes a brave person to say, whilst I don't know the answer to that, I'm also smart enough to go, I'm going to find it somewhere though.
Yep.
And I think that that's the difference, is it's like, I'm not going to sit on it. I'm not going to escalate it unnecessarily, but I do know that I need to solve it somehow.
Yeah.
So it's finding a way to solve it, even if you might not have the answer yourself. And I think that a founder or an owner that loves fixing a problem loves things to get escalated as well. So there's this sort of compounding impact of an owner going, I can solve that. It's like, yeah, but we don't really want you to solve that though. We want to build competence and capability within the business to be able to solve it without you.
I think that there's the other point there, which is new leaders and mature leaders. I think that having time leading people, it teaches you a lot of these lessons. And I think in some of our businesses where we are across this a lot, because we know that new leaders need a lot more help, right? Because then they might not have done some of these things before. They probably need a little bit more structure and those kind of things, where you would say a leader that's been around a little bit, led staff, led different types of staff and those kind of things. These things become innate in their leadership, or some they don't, but the ones that we work with, they become innate. And you go, even in the breadth of leadership in itself, there's still juniors and more seniors that 100%. Needed to be treated differently. You can't expect that there's going to be no escalation rules and processes for a junior leader, because they haven't done half the things before, right?
Yeah.
So being mindful of that is the seniority of the role of the leader is also a huge thing in here.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of business, again, probably underestimate that as well.
Yeah.
It's not tangible. You don't see it. And I think that founders who traditionally have this entrepreneurial mindset and they run at 100 miles an hour at times, there sometimes is that expectation that everyone else will run at the same pace and be able to make those decisions. And the simple fact is that they're not, or else they'd be out there running their own businesses, and they're not doing that either. Yep. So there is that sort of alignment piece where you've got to find that balance. And that balance only comes if you understand how to make the decision, or, you're trained, or you've got the expertise or the experience. And that doesn't come overnight. For some, it might. You might have those natural unicorns that go, I might not have had the experience, but I'm really good at making a decision. I can assess information really quickly, and I can land on something that's going to be 80, 90% right. But most people need time. Yep. They need to have gone through something. They need someone to show them, help them, to give them the confidence to be making those decisions.
Totally agree.
And I think that, what that leads, and we often talk about this, what we do, we're dealing with humans every day. And it's not that, decision making, tick that box and you're done for the day. It's not that at all. And it's really about recognizing that the energy level required to consistently be at your best and be making great decisions, it's hard.
Yeah.
So again, the more decisions that a leader has to make, or an owner, the more exhausted they tend to get, the more fatigue that they get, the more their energy drains. So part of it is being able to recognise that that's actually what happens, and be able to put some sort of, you talk about a matrix in play that, pushes down some of that where it makes sense to do so, is really powerful for a leader, and again, probably gets overlooked. But when we see businesses do that really well, we see that energy level of that leader lift, and then they go on to work on things that are more important from a scale and growth point of view.
No, totally. And I suppose that sort of energy, that's people's energy in a business holistically, not just the leaders and stuff like that, is one of the crucial things for achieving things in a business that are hard to achieve. You've got to be energized and have that momentum in order to achieve something special.
Yep. Yeah, agree.
I suppose a simple leadership check-in, and we were having a bit of a joke about this when we were talking about this episode.
I would ask this of my clients probably most sessions when a topic has come up or an issue has come up, and I would always say, are you the right person to be making the decision? Is there someone else in your business that either should be better equipped to make this decision, or, is there anyone else? Because I think once you start asking that question, you just open up a whole lot of opportunity around, well, hang on a sec, maybe I'm not the best person to make it. I've made it because I'm always the one that's naturally made it, but am I the best? I think asking that question of a business, is there someone else that could own that decision? And I always say, just start with one thing. If you're making hundreds of decisions a week, and you can let go of a few of those, that's progress.
And this is probably more from a ownership conversation into a senior leadership, and sometimes senior leadership into the mid-managers that sit under them. But, when we talk to owners of the business, and to clarify, when we sort of assist businesses, we generally will start with the time spent with the owners, and then probably push out into the senior leadership team and so on and so forth. But when we go into businesses, the owners are always super busy, right? And so part of that is, there's a whole lot of different reasons. But going to back to that, I've seen Sharron ask that question so many times, which is, should you be making this decision? Are you the person? And it's not to say that they can't make but the real question that you're asking is, should you be making other decisions that are more important and allowing that decision be made by somebody else? Not less important, but somebody who doesn't have the skills and capability that you have to make the more important or the harder decisions. And, it takes time, and you're right, it starts with one. But the confidence that you get with passing off one decision, one becomes two becomes five, and so on. And then you get that ability to, not from a matrix sense, but push some of that decision-making down, which allows you the time as a business owner to do the things that you should be doing.
Yeah, and I think asking that simple question, and particularly for a business that does have that leadership team in, it creates a great opportunity for a learning. Because if you're about to make the decision but someone else should be, make it with them and help them and go, okay, what decision would you have made? I want to help you through that. So the next time you're just going to be able to make it. You don't actually need me to help you. And I think it's taking the time to stop and go, I'm going to spend time on really developing that person, not just the doing. I'm going to become that trainer of sorts. And I think it's hard because, a lot of these businesses, they are going 100 miles an hour and, sort of putting the brake off for like half a second to go, I'm going to spend the time training, not doing. It's hard, but once you start to do that, you'll see that elevation of people within your business.
And that always takes way more time than people think it's going to take. And that's the challenging part. Back to what we sort of said in a couple of previous episodes is, as a business owner, you want to see that you've got a criteria in your head to say it should take this long for this to work, and inevitably that criteria is wrong. And I'm just as bad as that as sometimes you are as well. But I go, there's this. If it doesn't work because it's taking too long, and then you tick it off and you say, well, that didn't work, that becomes challenging in itself, right? But I suppose, great businesses don't rely on heroic decision-making. I think that's a great statement, because heroic decision-making that's not good.
Well, it's not scalable.
Correct, right? And it's easy to sit there at the top and go, all the decisions are me, and, I'm so amazing, I'm wonderful. And I had this, this reminds me of a story. I met somebody once and they did sort of advisory, and they said, nobody can do what I do. And I found that slightly challenging, because I thought, I felt that was quite an arrogant thing to say, number one. But the secondary part is, if you truly want to add value to businesses and you're one person, you're not really going to be able to add much value to many businesses, because if you are the only person in this world that can do what you do, you're only going to be able to touch such a small amount of people. And sort of for me, going back to the reason, Juno was just me, and then obviously you, and so on and so forth. It was designed to add value to as many people as we can, because so many businesses need that. That heroic nature of that decision making, only I can do this. It's I would say it's somewhat short-sighted. I think that there are people that are amazing at certain things, but I think that the ability to deliver that through something is the way it needs to be done.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think the other sort of check-in that we would use with our own clients is, if we're repeatedly looking at the same issue where a decision has not been able to be made, and we do that, we're sort of talking about the same thing, we would go, at some point you have to take a step back and go, have we actually solved the root cause of the problem? Or are we just sort of band-aiding it by making a decision and thinking that we're moving on? And I think what we say to clients is that if we're having the same conversation over and over and over again, we've not actually solved the root cause problem. And I think, again, businesses go so fast at times, they think they're solving the problem or making a decision that makes sense without actually going, hang on a sec, if I spent a little bit more time sort of unpacking or, peeling back the onion a little bit to go, actually, we're making a decision not based on actually the root cause of this problem. We need to take a step back. And I've seen clients that spend the time doing that, and the value that it brings, taking a little bit more time to go, actually, we're not making the best decision because we actually haven't understood the problem.
I think that there's a secondary problem to that, which you probably were going to go on to talk about, which is sometimes clients don't want to look at that core problem. And I go, that's it's a challenging client for us, right? Because a client where there's been some Band-Aid solutions, as you said, which is a great way to explain it. And then there's a real core problem, and the core problem probably involves the owner or ownership structure or whatever that looks like. You go, that's a challenging thing to look at and to dig up. And the worst part about that is that takes even more time. It takes so long. And, having been through that, both of us with many, many clients, it's the again, step by step, bit by bit. I mean, how do you eat an elephant one mouthful at a time or whatever it is? It's so true in that scenario. And I suppose where, one thing, the thing that I take away from this is, dealing with these things, it takes time and investment. And in order to do it properly, it shouldn't take all the time, but it does take a significant amount of time. But what that gets you is this platform, a base business structure that can allow you to scale. And a lot of the time it's people not setting up that base structure, scaling so fast and then going, it's not working. Well, it's not working because you haven't we use that A to F. You haven't gone from A to B, B to C, C to D, and so on. Yep. You've gone A to F and you've missed all those steps along the way. That's a challenging business to go back, which we do most of the time, go back and develop those things with a business that's absolutely heaving and growing because there's a real time pressure on getting it right because by not having it is costing the business a huge amount of time and money.
And I think that takes a bit of self-reflection as well. And, we would certainly say that the clients that are prepared to be more self-reflective are those that are prepared to actually take the step back, fix the problem, and then move forward.
Yep.
I think it does take that reflection piece. Today we've really sort of unpack that whole decision fatigue in a business and some of the blockages to why that happens in a business, and then for us some of the really key areas that we can break down that sort of decision fatigue for owners.
Yep.
In terms of being clear on the priorities, having the rhythms in play in your business to really have a space where you can resolve challenges and make good decisions. And the biggest one for me is the ownership, is being really clear about who ultimately owns the decision.
Yep.
And even that one question to ask yourself will help be able to cascade some of those decisions perhaps going forward.
Correct. And I think that the two things for me is the time it takes, which is and I think it's if you want to grow a business, you need to take decisions away from yourself.
Yep.
And as challenging that is and as hard as that's going to be, that's the only way you can do it. I mean, I would be keen to hear about a business that was a medium-sized business where one person made all the decisions, because I would find that difficult to think that could exist. But thank you, Sharron.
Thank you, Adam.
Should we have a little high five?
High five.